Yeah, my name is Ryan Farley, and I have been in Thailand for just under 10 years now. And for the last 2 years, I've been running a content marketing agency for apps and tech space, specifically software as a service apps that are funded um, with venture capital, generally in the Silicon Valley area. And yeah, so I started out with a friend who also lives in Bangkok, writing and now managing a team of writers as we're growing. So that's kind of who I am and what I do here. I am from Portland, Oregon, and after I graduated from university with a degree in political science and economics, I moved to Washington, D.C. And I worked in Washington, D.C. for 5 years in government relations, and I just got really jaded and depressed, unhappy about that situation. And Americans don't tend to like take a gap year. I was always a little bit jealous, or I had a regret that I never got to spend time before I kind of got locked in to sort of a career track. So when I decided to leave Washington, D.C., I figured I was doing well enough financially that I could take several months off and go kind of do more of a long-term backpacking trip than the, standard American 1 to 2 weeks abroad. So I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I think I had like $6,000 US in my account. This was 2012. And so, yeah, I just came here and tried to kind of stretch it for as long as I could, and probably could have stretched it a little bit further. But I wanted to go somewhere new, different. I had traveled Europe a fair amount, South America quite a bit. And so I thought Asia would be the next place. So Thailand was really just a place for me to land. And I spent a month or two here, and then was going off to Laos and Cambodia and Malaysia. And after spending about 6 months traveling and backpacking, came back to Thailand and decided that I would like to stay here a little bit longer. So the motivation was to travel without a return date, I guess. I had originally intended to return home, but that didn't happen. So 9 years later. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess challenge is relative. It seems quite daunting at first. I think moving here, even when you're here physically and you just say, "Oh, I want to stay longer," it seems difficult because Thailand, there's a lot of things that they say you need to do on paper that ultimately may end up being meaningless or not need to happen at all. It's like there's like a little bit of show. So you're gonna have to have this huge stack of documents, and you're gonna have to do all these things. So that was kind of scary and intimidating at first, but I think almost anywhere that, almost anywhere. So whether you're getting a job or if you're going to get a visa, like a student visa, one way you can stay a little bit longer is if you're studying. I studied Thai for 6 months, 5 days a week for like 1 to 2 hours a day, a very legitimate program. There's less legitimate programs. But the school that did my visa, I've had a couple different jobs here. They've all sorted the majority of my immigration paperwork out. So if you think you're going to go the DIY route, it can be pretty scary, but in the majority of cases, you don't need to go DIY. And then once you're kind of like in the system, I think once you're here for a year or two, it's kind of a piece of cake to keep the ball rolling and stay here as long as you want to stay. So, yeah. So I moved to a full-time position at a marketing company here that primarily served American clients. So that is one thing here. There's a lot of designers, developers, a lot of very talented Thai people that want to work with Western clients. And sometimes the language barrier can be difficult, or the cultural barrier. Like, even if somebody's fluent, maybe copywriting or somebody who learned English in a Thai environment doesn't translate to copywriting that does well in a American culture environment. So there's just lots of those jobs. And I worked there for a company called Brandnow Marketing. I worked there for 5 years. And I actually didn't develop my network there. It was just that I learned a lot of the skills I needed to develop my network further. The way I ended up developing my network was getting connected to another expat who lives here, who's more of a traditional digital nomad. His parents were missionaries, Christian missionaries. So he came here when he was like 11 or 12 years old, and he's 32 now. So he's spent 20 years, he grew up here really. And grew up here, but had always worked with American clients in sort of a digital nomad capacity to a certain extent. And so it was a little bit of him connecting me to some of his network. I was maybe connecting him to some of my network in terms of people who could help us, Thai developers, Thai graphic designers, things like that, which he had less of an experience with. And so yeah, I was getting connected with another expat, which I think is valuable, sometimes overlooked. You come here and you want a new, crazy, different experience, and you shun other expats. But it's I think it's pretty important to have that when you live abroad. For the kind of like graphic design development, I would say I would kind of classify them as more like technical skills, or a little more like black and white. I mean, graphic design is obviously creative, but it's, I think the gap between like a mediocre graphic designer and a good graphic designer is usually pretty apparent. And I have had great experiences with that in Thailand. Just really talented, specifically in my case, graphic designers and developers, really, really talented in that respect, and very friendly. And I also think that there's, in those two specific fields or those specific positions, there's kind of an above average familiarity with Western culture, or just Western business practices, communication, that type of stuff. Yeah, it's one of the reasons that the company I used to work for, Brandnow Marketing, was so successful. It was very easy for them to find developers and designers. They just needed maybe a little bit of help with the networking stuff and communication stuff. So of all my experiences in Thailand, that's been probably like one of the easiest or the most positive, honestly. Yeah, I would say it's kind of twofold. It's one piece of advice that kind of leads into a few things, which is try to stay connected to some type of expat community that is a positive expat community, and a optimistic or an uplifting one. Because I think a lot of people, especially younger people, I came here when I was 27 or 28. I specifically, when I got the teaching job, I specifically asked to be out in the country, because I wanted to experience something new and different and challenging, and so I remember kind of like actively shunning other expats. I don't want to talk to another American, I don't want to talk to another Westerner. I'm here to experience the culture. And that's great. That's noble, but I think it's important to keep some connection, because it's hard. It's hard to live in a different country, or a country that, in my opinion, is very different from most Western countries. And that can, when you're alone, that can turn into some negative feelings. Why did they do this? Why is this happening? I can't believe anybody would think this is the way that this should be. And those can really, I think those can really fester. And it's a weird thing where you can love being here and you can love a lot of things, but really begrudge certain things. And so I think it's important to have an expat community, and for it to be a positive one, because myself included, lots of people, lots of expats that live here can when they get together, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling so much with XYZ. And that can really devolve into a negative conversation. It's one that I definitely struggle with. When you're around somebody who understands your context, you start to go, oh, finally I can complain about X and they'll understand, they'll empathize. And then that person that probably had a similar experience, and this goes crazy when the two, people are like that together. So try to find an expat community and try to set some standards about let's be positive and let's be grateful about there's a lot of reasons that we're still here. I've been here for 10 years. And despite whatever complaints I have, I'm still here. I think it's just to remember that the people that you interact with have had a wildly, wholly, completely different experience than you have, and to remember that can totally affect the way that they see the world and the way they interact with the world. And I only say that because it's something I really struggle with. I really just think, how could you see this and come to this conclusion? And that can be hard. It can be hard, but if you're really reminding yourself of what a different experience it is, you can start to empathize with. I can really empathize with a Thai person traveling to America. That would be a really hard experience. Such a different culture. And so remember that they've had a totally different experience for their entire life, and that's led to different perspectives. And be grateful that you get to be challenged in that way. I love when my friends in America ask me this question because I always feel better after I answer it. I'm always like, oh yeah, the food is just amazing. I could not have cared any less about food before I came to Thailand. And I was like, what's the most calories for my dollar? What trashy fast food can I find now? But man, Thailand made me care about food. I really care about food now. And it's been 9.5 years. If you're new to Thailand, if you're watching this and in that first year or two, you can start to feel like their menu is quite limited. Like you're like, oh, I know the 25 dishes. There's like 25 dishes. I know them. I can tell you that you really don't. Really don't. I've been here for 9.5 years, and I'll still go to a restaurant with my wife, and she's, oh, we should try this. I'm like, what is that? And, oh, they've combined these two dishes that you've known for the last 9 years and did something a little bit different. Food is incredible. Traveling in country, domestic travel is a fantastic experience as well. It's easy to like forget about that. You go to the islands a few times and you're kind of like, all right, I've been there, done that. But there's no reason that you can't just be at beaches as often as you want. They're so affordable and they're so beautiful. On a personal level, I try to maintain a certain amount of like digital minimalism in terms of, for personal time, I'm off social media almost entirely. And I try to avoid, recently, I cut out Thai news as well. And I just think that's a lot easier to do here. Traveling abroad, again, it sounds cliche, but I think it really forces you to be introspective and like face some things. It really forces you to think about yourself and the way that you want to be. I think that I'm predisposed to certain struggles in terms of things I would like to change about myself. And I think that if I lived at home, I wouldn't be kind of forced to think about them and confront them. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but you're really going to have to be more thoughtful about who you are and how you interact with the people around you when communicating and interacting is not something that's just like you can do absent-mindedly. You have to be a lot more thoughtful here, whether it's because of a language barrier or a cultural barrier. You don't really have the choice to just check out. Or I think it's much harder to check out here. I think that the parts that are hard emotionally or intellectually are some of the most rewarding things you can do, even if it's just a few years.